Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Sometimes a relationship doesn't fall apart because of cheating, yelling, or betrayal, but because of one quiet moment where you realize your partner is willing to pretend you don't exist. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. She says she's socially awkward. I say she was ashamed. We're at a standstill. My girlfriend and I have been together for just over 2 years. I'm 28 and she's 29, and until recently our relationship had been stable in the quiet, boring way that usually means things are going right. We moved to a new city a few months ago for her job, which was a big step for both of us. New apartment, new routines, new social circles. She started at her new workplace about 3 months ago and had been slowly settling in. I knew she was nervous about fitting in, new job, mostly new people, different workplace culture. I tried to be supportive without hovering. I didn't want to be the boyfriend who shows up everywhere, especially since she was still building her own identity in that office. 2 days ago, her team had an after-work get-together at a bar. Nothing formal, just coworkers grabbing drinks after a long week. I stayed home, made dinner, and figured I'd see her later. About an hour in, she texted me saying her phone battery was dying and she'd forgotten her charger. Her phone uses an older USB type, and we keep a spare power bank at home, so I offered to bring it to her. I didn't think twice about it. I was trying to be helpful. When I got to the bar, I spotted her at a table with several coworkers. Everyone looked relaxed, drinks in hand, laughing. I walked over and handed her the power bank. Before I could even open my mouth, one of her colleagues leaned over and asked, "Oh, who's this?" My girlfriend didn't hesitate. "This is my friend," she said, smiling. "His name is my name. He agreed to lend me the charger." For a second, I thought I'd misheard her. I looked at her and said, half joking but very much confused, "Friend?" She laughed lightly, like I'd just told a harmless joke. "You're so funny," she said, taking the charger. "Thank you for this." Then she waved at me in that casual, dismissive way people do when they expect you to leave. I stood there, completely off balance. Oof, that friend line had to sting. It wasn't a slip-up. She said it clearly and right away. That's not just awkward. It's a choice. One of the other coworkers jumped in and said, "If you're free, you can join us." I shrugged and said, "Sure, why not?" That's when I noticed the flicker of annoyance on my girlfriend's face. Not subtle, not imagined, just enough to tell me she hadn't expected me to stay. I pulled up a chair and joined the conversation. People were friendly enough. They asked the usual things: what I do for work, how long I've lived in the city where I grew up. I answered politely, trying to keep things light. It's worth mentioning here that my girlfriend and most of her coworkers are Chinese. I'm Indian. That detail didn't seem important at first, but it would become relevant very quickly. Every time someone asked a question that naturally led toward how my girlfriend and I knew each other, she jumped in to answer before I could. She never lied outright, but she carefully stripped every answer of any romantic context. "We've known each other a long time. We met through mutual friends. We live nearby." Each response was technically true and emotionally empty. It started to feel deliberate. That's the worst part. It wasn't one mistake. She kept doing it. Every time someone could have figured it out, she stepped in to make sure they didn't. That's not avoiding questions. That's hiding you. The longer it went on, the more irritated I became. I wasn't trying to claim territory or make a show of anything. I just didn't like being quietly erased. I was sitting right there listening to her talk about me like I was a coworker from a past life. Then one of the colleagues, the same one who'd asked who I was earlier, had clearly reached the point of being pleasantly drunk. She laughed and said, "Girlfriend's name never told us she had such a good-looking friend." My girlfriend laughed politely along with her, a small practiced laugh. Something in me snapped. I smiled back at the colleague and I said, "I didn't know she had such a pretty coworker either." I winked. The colleague laughed harder. The table laughed. It was harmless, throwaway banter. But my girlfriend didn't laugh this time. Her face tightened immediately. Another coworker teased her and said, "Wow, you're an expert Cupid." My girlfriend turned red. I suddenly felt uncomfortable too. This wasn't flirting anymore. It was awkward, and the tension was obvious. I didn't want things to escalate, so after a few more minutes of small talk, I stood up and said I should get going. As I was leaving, someone joked that I should get the colleague's number from my girlfriend. I smiled, waved, and left. Your comment was definitely petty, but it came from a real place. She made you invisible, so you made yourself seen. It was messy, but it's understandable why you snapped. When my girlfriend came home later that night, she barely spoke to me. The silence carried into the next day. By the afternoon, she finally exploded. "You embarrassed me," she said. "What you did last night was basically cheating." I stared at her, stunned. "Cheating?" I repeated. "Are you serious?" She said I'd flirted with her coworker in front of everybody, that I'd disrespected her, that I'd hurt her badly. I told her I understood that my comment wasn't ideal. I admitted it wasn't my best moment, but I also told her she didn't get to ignore the part where she introduced me as just a friend and kept reinforcing that narrative all night. She shut that down immediately. "I didn't do anything wrong," she said. "I'm just socially awkward." Then came the explanation. She said she didn't want to deal with questions that her coworkers might react weirdly to her dating an Indian guy, that most of them were dating white or other Chinese people, and she didn't want to have to explain herself or field comments about interracial relationships. "It's exhausting," she said. "I just wanted to avoid all of that." I told her I didn't buy it. Avoiding questions is one thing. Pretending your partner doesn't exist is another. She didn't just deflect it once. She corrected the narrative repeatedly, even when it wasn't necessary. And she only seemed upset when I disrupted the story she'd created. I told her it felt like she was hiding me. She said I was overreacting. Her explanation about race is tough. It might be true that she was anxious about comments, but that doesn't make it okay. It means she chose her comfort over your dignity. That's a big deal. Now we're stuck. She wants an apology for embarrassing her. I want her to acknowledge that introducing me as just a friend and erasing our relationship, especially because of my race, was deeply hurtful. She insists she did nothing wrong. I refuse to apologize until she takes responsibility for what she did. We're at a standstill. And the worst part isn't the argument. It's realizing that sometimes you don't find out how visible you are to someone until they decide in public that you're easier to pretend away. This is the core of it. It's not about one bad night. It's about finding out your partner's willing to hide you to make her own life easier. That changes everything. And our next story. I returned Monday morning for a quiet meeting that cost the owners $16,000. About 30 years ago, when I was 17 and getting ready to head off to university, I was offered what sounded like a pretty sweet opportunity. An acquaintance from my parents' church, someone they trusted, said he could get me a job working in his pizza restaurant. The idea was that I'd learn the trade and pick up skills as a pizza chef while earning money for uni. At the time, that sounded fantastic. I'd had plenty of jobs already and wasn't afraid of hard work, but cooking professionally was completely new territory for me. My Italian food experience basically began and ended with Pizza Hut. I went into it fully aware that I'd be more of a liability than an asset at first. I told myself that was fine. Everyone starts somewhere. What I didn't fully appreciate at 17 was how easy it is for learning the trade to quietly turn into working for free. For the first few months, I wasn't paid at all. That was pitched as part of the learning process. I figured I was young and experienced and didn't really know any better, so I went along with it. I worked hard, showed up on time, stayed late when asked, and tried to absorb everything I could. Slowly, I stopped being dead weight and started actually carrying my share. Then one day, I realized something had changed. I wasn't shadowing anyone anymore. I wasn't being trained. I was opening the shop by myself, running entire shifts solo, taking orders, making pizza, cleaning up, locking the place at night. At that point, learning had turned into doing the job. So I did something that took every ounce of courage my 17-year-old self could scrape together. I confronted the owner. Let's call him Nick, because that was his name. Nick didn't take it well. He puffed up, complained, and told me how terrible I supposedly was at my job, how lucky I was to even be there, how I still had so much to learn. But for once, I didn't back down. I told him plainly that if I was opening the shop and running full shifts alone, I should be paid. After a lot of huffing and posturing, he relented. I was put on minimum wage. At the time, that felt like a victory. This is where a lot of people get stuck. You were young and thought getting paid anything was a win, but Nick knew he was still taking advantage. Minimum wage for running the whole place by yourself was still a ripoff. I stayed there for another 3 years, working my way through most of my university degree. My schedule was brutal, but became strangely normal. About 30 hours a week at uni, another 30 hours working at the restaurant, and at least 30 more studying. Sleep was optional, burnout was constant, but I told myself it was temporary and that grinding through it would be worth it. Toward the end of that stretch, something clicked. I got smarter, older, less naive. I started paying attention to things I'd ignored before: payslips, tax summaries, hours worked versus hours paid. I began reading up on labor laws. That's when I realized Nick, along with the other owners, had been screwing me for years. I wasn't on the correct pay rate. My taxes weren't being handled properly. There were little oversights everywhere, and all of them benefited the business, not me. By then, I was working alongside a mate of mine. We'll call him Girlfriend Creeping D-Head, because that nickname was well-earned. Despite the name, he was solid on the job and just as fed up as I was. Good on you for finally checking the details. A lot of people just grumble but never look into it. Once you saw the numbers and the laws, you couldn't unsee it. That's what gave you real power. Then things escalated. We got a new boss, someone who just bought into the business. This bloke walked around like he'd invented pizza. Chest out, loud voice, big ego. He treated the place like his personal stage and thought owning part of a restaurant automatically made him the most important person in the room. I'd already spent years working Christmas nights, New Year's Eve, World Cup matches, always cooking for boss's mates without complaint, so the arrogance wasn't new. But this guy took it to another level. And one Sunday night, in the middle of a packed service, he finally pushed it too far. Sunday night was always chaos at that place, but this one was especially bad. The restaurant was absolutely packed. Every table was full. The phone wouldn't stop ringing, and tickets were stacked all the way down my rail. Girlfriend Creeping D-Head and I were moving at full speed, completely in sync, the way you only get after working with someone for a long time. It was loud, hot, stressful, and exhausting, but manageable. Except for one problem: the new boss. He decided that night, in his infinite wisdom, that we were only allowed to run one half of the pizza oven. It was a 2-tier oven, and he flat out refused to let me fire up the second tier because it cost too much. Never mind the fact that the place was slammed and the single oven was already overloaded, so there we were, oven completely full, pizza stacked edge to edge, doors opening constantly, heat bleeding out faster than it could recover. The oven temperature kept dropping, which slowed cook times, which backed up tickets, which made everyone angrier, including the head chef, who was screaming at me because his dishes were ready but my pizzas weren't. Then the new boss decided to help. A couple of his mates showed up, and instead of asking us to throw in some complimentary garlic bread or snacks, he wandered into the kitchen himself without asking. Without knowing what he was doing, he started loading trays into the oven. Worse, every 30 seconds, he'd open the oven door to check on them. Every time that door opened, more heat escaped. More pizzas stalled, more tickets backed up. It was like watching someone slowly drown your station while smiling about it. I snapped. I walked over and said, calmly at first, "Stop messing with my oven. If you want garlic bread, just ask. I'll get it done." He looked confused, like the concept of consequences was new to him. He nodded and said, "Okay." Did he stop? Of course not. He did it again and again. The third time I told him flat out that if he did it again, I'd lose my crap. I wasn't shouting. I wasn't being dramatic. Just very, very clear. 30 seconds later, the oven door opened again, and that was it. After 3 years of being underpaid, overworked, lied to, and disrespected, something in me finally shut off. I looked at Girlfriend Creeping D-Head and said, "You ready?" He didn't hesitate, just nodded, "Yup." We took off our aprons, slowly, deliberately, in full view of the entire restaurant. We set them on the bench, looked at the new boss, and said, "We quit. Everything in that oven, every ticket on that rail, and your mate's garlic bread, you can deal with it. Good luck." Then we walked out. Not ran, walked. We went next door, grabbed coffees from the baristas, and sat where we could still see the kitchen. And oh my God, it was glorious. The new boss was completely lost. He had no idea how to manage the oven, no idea how to paste tickets, no idea how to coordinate with the kitchen. Food started coming out in random order. Pizzas lagged 20 minutes behind other dishes. Tables got angry. Servers panicked. You could practically hear the reputation of the restaurant burning in real time. Was it petty? Absolutely. Was it satisfying? Beyond words. Walking out mid-rush was the ultimate power move. You didn't just quit. You showed them exactly how much they needed you by letting everything fall apart right in front of the customers. That's a lesson they felt immediately. But that wasn't the real revenge. The real revenge was already in motion. For over a year, every Sunday night, I'd quietly taken the timesheet home, photocopied it, then returned it Monday morning like nothing happened. I kept copies of everything, and I'd told girlfriend Creeping D-Head to do the same. Monday morning, I walked back in like nothing was wrong. Nick was there. The second he saw me, his face turned red. He started yelling across the restaurant floor, screaming for me to get the F out and never come back. I calmly said, "Nick, we need to talk privately." He tried to posture, storming off to his tiny office out back, ready to threaten and bluster. And that's when the real fun began. Nick slammed the door of his little office like he was about to put me in my place. He went first, exactly like I knew he would. He puffed up, started ranting about how I'd abandoned my shift, how I'd ruined service, how he was going to withhold my pay, blacklist me, and make sure I never worked in hospitality again. It was the same routine he'd used on staff for years. Lots of yelling, lots of empty threats, and zero understanding of labor law. I let him finish. When he finally ran out of breath, I calmly slid a thick stack of paper onto his desk. "Read this." He frowned, annoyed, then started flipping pages. There was an Excel spreadsheet laying out every hour I'd worked. Next to it were photocopies of timesheets every Sunday night, every shift. Behind those were copies of payslips, tax summaries, and printed excerpts of the wage awards that applied to my role during those years. The color drained from his face. I pointed at the bottom line of the spreadsheet. "You owe me $6,000. I'll take a check or cash. Today." He started stammering immediately. He said he couldn't afford it, that there must be a mistake, that he'd show me his bank accounts. He actually started rummaging through drawers looking for statements, like I was supposed to feel sorry for him. I didn't. I leaned back and said, "Nick, I don't care about your finances. You owe me $6,000 today. Or I take all of this to the tax office, Fair Work, and every other government department that would love to know how you're paying your staff." Then I added very calmly, "And let's be honest, you're not just doing this to me, are you?" That's when it really hit him, because the timing couldn't have been worse. He and the other owners had just been raided by the tax office. The business was already on thin ice. Any additional scrutiny would have buried him, and I knew it. He knew I knew it. He tried one last angle, said he didn't have the money on hand. I shrugged. "You just bought a $60,000 Pajero. Sell it. Borrow it. I don't care. I get paid today." He actually teared up a little. I'm still not sure if it was rage, panic, or the realization that someone he thought was beneath him had just cornered him completely. 10 minutes later, he wrote the check. I walked out of the office holding $6,000 owed to me for years of bullcrap. It cashed. No bounce, no drama. But the best moment came next. Standing outside the office was girlfriend Creeping D-Head. He looked Nick dead in the eye and said, "Nick, we need to talk." Then he walked in and did the exact same thing. Nick lost another $10,000 that day. Now this is the real win. You didn't just get mad, you got smart. Having all those copies and knowing about the tax raid meant he had no way out. Getting your mate paid too? Perfect. Word spread fast. A few coworkers pulled me aside asking what had happened because Nick was absolutely furious. I told them the truth, showed them how to copy timesheets, told them which laws applied, told them exactly where Nick had been cutting corners. Several of them followed suit. I left hospitality shortly after and moved into my field of study. I never looked back. No late nights, no screaming bosses, no stolen wages, no unpaid learning opportunities. Years later, I still think about that moment, not with bitterness, but clarity. That experience taught me something early. Employers will take everything you let them, and the moment you stop letting them, they fold. Nick never spoke to me again, but I guarantee he remembered me, and that was the most satisfying part of all. The best part's how you helped others, too. You didn't just get yours and leave. You showed your coworkers how to stand up for themselves. That kind of lesson lasts way longer than just one payout. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.